To another Sunday School Short. Today we're in Jeremiah 38, 39, 40, and 41. Like, subscribe, and share if this is a blessing to you. Everybody needs a daily devotion. If not this one, get one. Alright, Jeremiah 38. Officials heard what Jeremiah had been saying. Everyone left in Jerusalem will die of war, famine, and disease. Everyone who surrenders to Babylon will live. Their life will be their reward. And the king's officials went to King Zedekiah, who was the king at the time. His message here is undermining morale here. And King Zedekiah said, who was a weak king and the last king, he goes, I can't do anything with you. You do as you please. He was pretty much apathetic. He had given up Jerusalem anyway. They took Jeremiah from the palace cell and put him in a cistern, which was a place where water was stored. No water was in this one, but it was muddy at the bottom. It was like quicksand almost. He was going to end up starving to death. A dude named Edom Melech, who was another king's official, he said, what these other guys done is an evil thing. Jeremiah is going to starve to death. And King Zedekiah, again, a wishy-washy king, a spineless king, he said, take 30 of my men, pull Jeremiah out, and return him to the palace prison. Now, sometime later, King Zedekiah goes to Jeremiah and says, hey, I want to ask you something. And Jeremiah says, hey, well, ask away, but if I tell you the truth, you're going to kill me. If I give you advice, you're not going to follow it anyway. King Zedekiah promised, hey, I'll listen to you this time, or you won't be harmed, you won't be killed. He didn't necessarily say I would listen, but he said you won't be killed. Jeremiah said, if you surrender to Babylon, which is what he said all along, all these warnings, and this is just from one prophet. God had sent prophets throughout the ages of Israel and Judah, and none of them had listened, or very, very few had listened. If you surrender to Babylon, you and your family will live. Jerusalem will not burn. If not, you will not escape, and Jerusalem will burn to the ground. The officials asked, what were you and the king talking about? Verse 27, and Jeremiah said what he was told by King Zedekiah. Just tell him, hey, you wanted a prison transfer. You didn't want to go back to the dungeon. You wanted to be here. So nobody really knew their true conversation, the truth of it. Jeremiah 39, in January of the 9th year of King Zedekiah's reign, the King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came with his army and besieged Jerusalem. 2.5 years they broke through the walls, and the walls of the city fell. So that's the 11th year of King Zedekiah's reign. King Zedekiah tried to slip out in darkness, but he was caught by and taken to the king of Babylon. They made him watch as his sons were killed right there in front of him and the other nobles of Judah. In verse 7, they gouged out King Zedekiah's eyes and bound him with bronze chains and led him away to Babylon. See, he was warned again and again this was going to happen, but he refused to listen, and he got what he got. The king of Babylon carried the people off to Babylon, but in verse 10 it says, left a few of the poorest people in Judah, and he assigned them vineyards and fields to care for. The king of Babylon told his captain of the guard to find Jeremiah. So Jeremiah was a popular prophet. Even the enemy knew of him. Give him anything he wants. That's what King Nebuchadnezzar had conveyed to the captain of the guard. So God's going to take care of you if you continue to do his will, his way, and his word. God's going to take care of you just as he did Jeremiah. Even in terrible, horrific circumstances. Verse 14, so Jeremiah stayed in Judah among his own people. And Jeremiah gives word from the Lord to Ebed-Melech, the guy that saved his life out of the cistern, that destruction will happen here. This is going to happen here in Jerusalem. It's already happening. But you will be rewarded with your life because you trusted me. 40:41, Jeremiah 40:41. When the captain of the guard found Jeremiah, he was in bronze chains. He released him, and the last part of 4, he says, go wherever you like. You can go with me to Babylon if you like, or you can stay here with the appointed governor that the king Nebuchadnezzar appointed as governor, Gedaliah. You can stay with him. And Jeremiah decided to stay. In verse 6, he said he lived in Judah with the few that were still left in the land. And Gedaliah went and met with some of the guerrilla bands that were on the countryside. And they weren't real sure what was happening here, but he vowed to them, hey, Babylon's no longer any threat to you. They don't want any further harm to you. We're just subservient to them right now. Essentially, what he was leading them to believe. Stay in the homes in the towns you have taken, harvest crops, etc., like that. One of the guerrilla leaders, Johanna, came to Gedaliah and said in verse 14, "Did you know that the king of Ammon is trying to assassinate you? He sent a dude named Ishmael to assassinate you." But Gedaliah refused to believe him. He said, "You're lying even." Johanan went on to offer to kill Ishmael, but Gedaliah forbid it to happen. And then in 41, Jeremiah 41, Ishmael had been part of the previous royal family and met with Gedaliah while they were eating together. Ishmael and 10 of his men suddenly jumped up, drew their swords, and killed Gedaliah. In the meantime, about 80 men were coming in to worship in the temple. Well, Ishmael, playing it off, he didn't want everybody to know that he had killed Gedaliah, so he played it off. Look at what's happened, and he ended up setting them up. He killed all but 10 of those guys out of those 80, threw all their bodies in a cistern, and the 10 that he let survive, the only reason why he let them was because they said that they were going to bring their stores of wheat and barley and olive oil and honey and that type of thing. Again, all the bodies were dumped into the cistern. He left back for Ammon with captives of wives and women and other slaves and such as that. The guerrilla leader Johanan chased after him and tracked him down. All the captives came over to Johanan's side, and they kind of overtook Ishmael, but he escaped with 8 of his men. In the meantime, back to Ammon. And then in the meantime, Johanan, who had actually won the battle, he was now fearful of what Babylon would think. He would get pinned, Gedaliah's death on him. So a lot of hodgepodge of stuff that's happening here. But essentially, what has happened was Babylon put somebody, Gedaliah, in leadership over Judah. Okay? And then people came and tried to take him out, and they ended up taking him out, and then another guy came to his rescue. And so get into God's Word. I can only give you these hot spots here, these short snippets. This is a supplement, not a substitute for your time in God's Word. Like, subscribe, and share if this is a blessing to you.